The trading blows on gas sites and refineries marks a major escalation in the war in the Middle East, and it's rattling the already volatile energy market. Also, Trump administration officials publicly pressed on whether Iran posed an imminent threat. The price set for fuel in regional Australia catches the eye of the consumer watchdog. And more resources sent north to assist communities in Narelle's path. I'm Janice Petersen. This is SBS World News. Good evening. Energy production facilities has become the latest front in the war in the Middle East. Iran has threatened strikes on significant oil and gas sites across the Persian Gulf in retaliation for an attack on facilities related to the South Pars gas field. It says that's crossed a red line. The world's largest known gas reserve is shared with Qatar and is the biggest source of domestic energy in Iran. In response, strikes have been reported in Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. The escalation sent the price of oil and gas soaring. Brent crude went up more than 5% and at one point it was more than $110 a barrel.
Another escalation threatening to deepen the global energy crisis. Israeli strikes hit South Pars, part of the world's largest oil and gas field. Tehran quickly responded in kind, lashing out at its neighbours.
This is a firm warning to those responsible for attacking parts of Iran's fuel and energy infrastructure in the south. In response, the fuel, energy and gas facilities at the source of the attack will be set ablaze and reduced to ashes at the earliest opportunity.
Qatar says a refinery in the Ras Laffan was hit by Iranian missiles, sustaining extensive damage. Strikes in Saudi Arabia also threatening gas facilities in its eastern region. The country's foreign ministry says interceptors took down Iranian drones and missiles and threatened to retaliate.
As we have stated quite clearly, we have reserved the right to take military actions if deemed necessary.
The IDF has not officially confirmed it targeted South Pars, which supplies around 80% of Iran's gas. But President Trump has taken it to Truth Social with this post saying Israel violently lashed out at the facility. The United States knew nothing about this particular attack, adding that no more attacks will be made by Israel. Israel's strike also affects Qatar, which shares the gas field. Qatari authorities calling the attack dangerous and irresponsible. Iran's president added that such aggressive acts could have uncontrollable consequences. Analysts sounding alarm over the potential long-term ramifications.
Even though right now we're facing a major disruption in oil and gas flow, the expectation is once the war ends, that flow will resume. But if we start to see attacks on the oil and gas infrastructure, that portends a lasting and prolonged impact on energy prices, well and truly beyond the war ending.
The impact of price rises acute for Iranians as well. Shopkeepers in Tehran say the war has sharply weakened demand.
Before the war, the market had just started to recover. Despite high inflation, we had only just begun to make a modest living. Then the war started and everything fell apart.
Shows of defiance from loyalists of the Islamic Republic at funerals held for more senior leaders assassinated in the war. Last night, another killed by Israel, Iran's intelligence minister, Ismail Hatib. A wave of missiles fired by Iran into central Israel killed 2 people. Tom Stainer, SBS World News.
The Israeli military is continuing to expand its operations in Lebanon, sending more troops into the south. Mass evacuation orders deepening what was already a displacement crisis.
Lebanon's largest stadium no longer teeming with sports fans. It's now a displacement centre for hundreds of families. Beyond the turnstiles and underneath the grandstands, a tent city. Many here preparing iftar with Eid, one of the most important celebrations on the Muslim calendar, fast approaching.
إني كنا على الجبانة. يعني هذا اللي بس مأثر فيه إنه ما حقدر أطلع وأقرأ له الفاتحة وهالقصص.
فكنا غرباء ضمن الوطن. هاي المشكلة. وهي أصعب من الحرب يعني.
That war coming to central Beirut. The Israeli military flattening this 10-storey building on Wednesday morning, with at least 12 people killed in strikes across the Lebanese capital. The IDF says it targeted Hezbollah, including a financial institution. In Lebanon's south, one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities now resembles a ghost town. Doctors refusing to evacuate to help the wounded.
عم بيجي المريض يعني بدون lower extremity craniotomy open wound وكل هالشغلات مع بعض عم بيكون المريض تقريبا مشقف وتعبان كثير غير هذيك المره كنت اخف شوي.
Israel continues to step up attacks on southern Lebanon, hitting 2 bridges crossing the Litani River. The IDF says it's targeting crossings used by Hezbollah to move fighters and weapons.
The plan is to make sure that Hezbollah doesn't have military infrastructure when we leave, and we make sure that we separate civilian infrastructure from military infrastructure.
The UN on Tuesday warning of possible war crimes, raising concerns about the vast area of southern Lebanon now under evacuation orders.
These orders may amount to forced displacement, which is prohibited under international humanitarian law.
71-year-old Fatma Mohammed Basharoush, just one among a million people displaced.
بيجينا العيد بدنا نقوم الصبح نعايد بعضنا نقول لهم كل عام وانتم بخير ونحن قاعدين بالمدارس مهجرين كيف بدها تطلع هالكلمه مننا مش رح تطلع.
Little to celebrate as she shelters in this vacant classroom. Taisok Yuzi, SBS World News.
And you can hear more on the war in the Middle East, including interviews and analysis in the latest episode of World News Weekly. That's available wherever you get your podcasts. Top officials in the Trump administration have faced public questioning over what guided the president's decision to launch strikes on Iran. One of the key questions, whether there was an imminent threat to the United States.
Counting the human cost of a foreign war, one of 6 US service members killed in a drone strike in Kuwait earlier this month returned to his Florida hometown as the president touched down in Dover, Delaware, where 6 more service members were returned in coffins. Donald Trump's justifications for waging war on Iran facing mounting domestic scrutiny following yesterday's resignation letter revelation from his top counter-terrorism official, Joe Kent, that said Iran posed no imminent threat. Intelligence officials facing a public grilling on that critical point.
It is not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent threat.
It is precisely your responsibility.
In her written submissions, Tulsi Gabbard said Iran had made no efforts to rebuild its nuclear enrichment program after it was obliterated in last year's 12-day war. She did not repeat this in her oral remarks, she says, due to time constraints.
And I skipped through some of the portions
so you chose to take
my oral delivered remarks.
You chose to omit the parts that contradict the president.
The CIA director.
Tulsi Gabbard told the hearing the Iranian regime was intact but largely degraded. Both she and CIA Director John Ratcliffe said Iran maintained intent to develop its nuclear program and ballistic missiles, and denied hearing the president say he was shocked by Iran's retaliatory attacks on Gulf states and the Strait of Hormuz.
And yet the president says nobody knew. And my question is, did you tell him?
The comments that you talked about, I had not heard. But what I can tell you is that Iran had specific plans to hit U.S. interests in energy sites across the region.
The president continuing to vent frustration of allies rejecting his request to join in securing the Strait of Hormuz, writing that he wonders what would happen if the US finished off Iran and stepped back from the strait.
I don't have any idea what the president is trying to do. I mean, this is the most confused situation I've ever imagined the United States would find it in.
Rumours of Republican rumblings over the president's war aims and justifications not enough for Democrats to succeed in their second attempt to rein in his power to unilaterally order military action. A vote in the Senate failing 53 to 47. Alexandra Jones, SBS World News.
More on our coverage of the war in the Middle East shortly, where there's been a quiet redeployment of US assets from South Korea, and the move is straining a decades-old alliance. The Iranian women's football team is now back in their home country, completing a fraught return journey from Australia. 5 members who had sought protection overseas have withdrawn their claims and rejoined the squad. The federal government had offered humanitarian visas to the group, citing fears of persecution. Only 2 players remain in Australia. Back home, and the Prime Minister has called for the war to end soon. There were more warnings today about the impact of the conflict on the economy, with new measures announced to try and boost fuel supply, while today's latest electricity price forecasts are also at the whims of the war.
Punished first at the pump, then on loans. So what can Australians expect with their power bills?
At this point, we are cautious but calm.
The draft market offer from the National Energy Regulator suggesting prices for much of the East Coast could fall by up to 10% for households and 21% for businesses. The final decision due May to include any impacts from the war in the Middle East, which has disrupted global energy markets.
There have been some increases in the last couple of weeks, but those, even at elevated prices, are still well below where they were a year ago.
And this is not the end of the work on cost of living, far from it.
With a continuing coast-to-coast crunch at the Bowser, 519 million litres of fuel now directed to the regions from Australia's reserves.
Well, it will take a little bit of time for this to flow through the supply chain.
The ACCC now probing the behaviour of the 4 major fuel suppliers over diesel stocks in those communities.
Whether they're retailers or distributors, the government needs to lean on them and make sure the fuel is getting to the customers.
The Prime Minister's message after convening National Cabinet from Hobart.
Please do not take more fuel than you need.
Confirming former Energy Watchdog Chief Anthea Harris will oversee a fuel supply task force to work with the states and territories.
Our fuel supply is currently secure. However, I want us to be over-prepared.
The task force should be the Minister and his team.
Further measures are expected to steady the nation against supply chain shocks, leaving some asking,
are we having a COVID 2.0 moment?
Wanting safeguards for essential industries in case of widespread disruption.
If that means that fuel rationing has to occur for the betterment of the country as a whole, so be it.
The Treasurer's pre-budget spiel already warning of a slowing economy with hits to productivity and more people looking for work.
This conflict is not the only major challenge we face in our economy, but it does exacerbate the others.
Leaders today were briefed on the situation by the Office of National Intelligence and ASIO. The Prime Minister expressing confidence the US has achieved its objectives, wanting the war to end soon.
It's not certain, that's the truth, how long this will last. But I'm hopeful that you can see an end point.
But the aftershocks won't stop soon. Naveen Razik, SBS World News.
Still to come, the experts point out the simple measures that could help your fuel go further. Also, neighbours Pakistan and Afghanistan pause attacks for Eid celebrations. Heavy rains and strong winds lash Pakistan's biggest city. And just who has something to smile about when it comes to this year's happiness index? Pakistan and Afghanistan have agreed to temporarily pause hostilities for Eid al-Fitr, days after its deadliest escalation. Millions of people around the world are preparing for the Muslim holiday tomorrow, which celebrates the end of Ramadan. But festivities have been dampened for many who are marking the day against the backdrop of conflict.
Lines of coffins transported to a mass funeral in Afghanistan's capital, where people prayed as bulldozers dug pits in the cemetery.
سیاست طفل این مردمی که معتاد بودن به خاطر تداوتی خود رفته بود که امروز باید به خانواده خود میرسیدین اینجا بر تابوت‌ها ماندگیستند.
The Taliban government says more than 400 people were killed after Pakistan struck a drug rehabilitation center in Kabul earlier this week. Pakistan denying the accusation, stressing it had only targeted terrorist infrastructure. The information minister today confirming a pause in fighting between the two neighbours for Eid al-Fitr, a move welcomed by the UN.
Secretary General has called for de-escalation and the immediate cessation of hostilities, and for parties to comply with international law. So this is in line with that, and we hope that the suspension during Eid will be extended.
Eid preparations in the midst of conflict also a reality for Palestinians. In this displacement camp in Gaza City, Fatima Ghandour is baking sweets over an open fire, which she says suffocates her.
احنا يوم بقينا في نعمة بقينا غاز ولا نعرف نار ولا أي حاجة بالحرب عرفنا النار عقصولها والتشحبر وقرف النار بعيد عنا.
In Khan Yunis, people roam markets looking for food and new clothes, necessities now deemed a luxury.
الأواعي كتير غالية بصراحة. أنا جوزي له 3 سنين الحين من أول الحرب ما اشتريناش أواعي بصراحة أواعي عيد ولا عرفنا طعم العيد خالص لأنا ولا أولادي.
Celebrations elsewhere clouded by economic pressures. The UN says more than 90% of Syria's 25 million population now live below the poverty line.
هذا العيد للأغنياء فقط مو للفقراء. الفقير عليه إنه يشوفه يتحسر بس أما يشتري من إيده عجيبته هاي بعيدة كتير.
Mahnaz Anguri, SBS World News.
The United Nations is appealing for more than $2 billion to support its humanitarian efforts in Yemen as it faces a deepening crisis. More than 22 million people in the country will require aid assistance this year. More than 5 million people are internally displaced. The UN says humanitarian action alone is not enough. It's calling on a political solution to restore essential services and revive livelihoods. Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, has appointed General Gustavo González López as the country's new Minister for Defence. He replaces Vladimir Pedrino, who held the position for more than a decade and was closely tied to Nicolás Maduro. Mr. Pedrino described his tenure as Defence Minister as the honour of his life. Heavy rain and thunderstorms have lashed Pakistan's largest city, leaving at least 16 people dead. Parts of Karachi also experienced power outages and wind gusts of almost 100 kilometres an hour, according to local meteorologists. The wet weather is forecast to ease on Friday. Indonesian military police have arrested 4 army officers over an acid attack on a human rights activist. The victim, Andre Yunus, is well known for his opposition to the Indonesian military's growing influence in civilian life. International correspondent Claudia Farhart has more from Jakarta.
Andre Yunus had just finished recording a podcast about the Indonesian military's influence in politics when he was attacked. He was riding his motorbike down a central Jakarta street last Thursday when 2 men on another bike threw acid on him. Mr Yunus has been in intensive care ever since. His colleagues say he suffered severe burns to the right side of his body, including to his face, eye, hands and chest. A week later, military police have now arrested 4 people, all of them members of a military intelligence unit. The authorities say they're still investigating a potential motive, including whether the suspects may have been acting on orders from their superiors, but there are already concerns here about the military investigating itself. The Legal Aid Institute Jakarta is saying we appeal to the Indonesian military police to hand them over to the Jakarta Metro Police because there is a high risk of conflicts of interest and there is a high risk of them not being punished and processed objectively. There have been consistent concerns here in Indonesia about the military's expanding role in public life since President Prabowo Subianto took office in late 2024. He's a former Army general himself, and he did face accusations of human rights abuses in the 1990s under General Suharto. Last year, there were major protests here in the capital after he pushed through laws allowing soldiers to take up more government and civilian posts, a move Andre Yunus and other activists were very critical of. The director of Amnesty International Indonesia described this as a violent attack aimed at silencing human rights defenders, saying, "We urgently call upon the authorities to conduct a thorough, transparent and swift investigation into this incident." The suspects are set to face military trial, and the military is promising those proceedings will be transparent.
Our international correspondent Claudia Farhart reporting there from Jakarta. The UN body that oversees international shipping has held an emergency meeting as the war in the Middle East raises safety fears for those working in the industry. Thousands of seafarers and vessels remain stranded around the Strait of Hormuz, which serves as a key transportation route for fuel. The UN Shipping Agency has previously proposed a safe maritime corridor to evacuate stranded ships and their crews.
In the Persian Gulf, the vessels can't leave, they are actually trapped. Many of those ships are tankers, so you've got seafarers who are sitting on board a steel box, basically imprisoned because they can't get off the ship and the ship can't move.
Meetings will continue overnight. Resolutions adopted by the organisation are considered non-binding. The United States is reportedly redeploying artillery and anti-missile systems from North Korea and to the Middle East. The move has raised concerns in Seoul and is raising questions over the decades-old alliance.
US artillery and anti-missile systems defending South Korea have been quietly redeployed to the Middle East, despite Seoul's objections.
While we have expressed opposition to such a move, the reality is that we cannot fully enforce our position.
US President Donald Trump has also pressured South Korea and Japan to send warships to the Strait of Hormuz, which had been a major oil transit route before the war and which Iran has effectively closed. South Korea is considering Trump's request, though many politicians in the ruling party say sending ships would be illegal under the country's laws. There is also concern about the US pivot to China dragging Seoul into an unnecessary conflict with Beijing. For those advising the South Korean government, the mounting demands are testing the alliance.
There's a general line that South Korea should cooperate with the United States, but the real question is, whose war is this? It feels less like America first and more like Israel first. And I think there is a fundamental question as to why South Korea should have to cooperate in a war that is for Israel.
The crisis is also reviving charged debate over whether South Korea should acquire nuclear weapons.
This is not something emerging only in South Korea. It has already begun to surface in Japan as well. Japan is a country with 3 non-nuclear principles and a pacifist constitution.
South Korea and Japan together host more than 80,000 US troops, a presence long regarded as the bedrock of regional security, a bedrock that is starting to crack.
Jack Barton reporting from Seoul. Preparations are underway in far north Queensland and the Northern Territory as tropical cyclone Narelle barrels towards the Cape York coast. The system, which intensified into a Category 5 today, is expected to make landfall near Cohen tomorrow morning before moving on to the Northern Territory over the weekend.
The calm before the storm as tropical cyclone Narelle approaches. An additional risk for many Queensland communities, flash flooding after weeks of persistent rain.
It really is a resilient community, and I don't doubt that, everyone will pull together after the cyclone to make sure their neighbours are safe, pets are safe, help rebuild buildings if that needs to be.
State and federal governments urging communities to have plans in place.
There are challenges in this system, big challenges, but we have prepared for them.
The system could bring wind gusts over 250 kilometres an hour and rainfall in excess of 500 millimetres.
The type of wind that is being predicted is the sort of thing that will blow apart sheds, that will blow caravans down roadways and create fields of airborne debris.
Additional emergency services have been sent to the state's far north, including the deployment of 49 extra police officers to remote communities.
I'm just coming to check on everyone because of the cyclone coming up.
Officers in Cape York going door to door to ensure communities are prepared. Narelle is expected to impact several Indigenous communities in the state's far north, remote communities like Wujal on high alert.
We don't need to panic. Let us get prepared for what's coming. We've got services, on the ground there.
Around 500 residents from the Territory community of Numbawa are being evacuated to Darwin.
The Australian Defence Force will be assisting with that evacuation, which we greatly appreciated.
Preparing for the worst, but hoping for the best. Jasmine Cheong, SBS World News.
One of the Northern Territory's largest land councils says Indigenous people housed in evacuation centres after record flooding aren't being provided adequate care. The Northern Land Council has written to federal and territory governments asking them to meet community leaders about their concerns. Chairperson Matthew Ryan says ongoing displacement has caused distress and trauma, while some residents have spent more than a month sleeping on camping stretchers at facilities in Darwin.
Millions. It's a cash cow for the agencies. Mate, the money could have been well spent in the community, developing better facilities for the community. And the traditional owners and the leaders should be at the talking table, rather than, being disregarded.
The Northern Territory government says it plans to move evacuees to another facility south of Darwin, and that will help with support and privacy, with remote upgrades also on the table. And the Federal Minister for Indigenous Australians, Malindiri McCarthy, told SBS she convened a meeting of land councils and First Nations organisations yesterday and stands ready to support the NT if it requests additional support. New Closing the Gap data shows progress is stalling and in some areas slipping backwards. With only a handful of targets on track, there are growing warnings that time is running out to meet the 2031 deadline to eliminate socio-economic inequity.
At the Adelaide Showground, Close the Gap Day, bringing community together. A showcase of culture, connection and support.
Our political leaders, we've also, they've got to make a commitment to be part of this issue because we can't do it alone.
But across the country, new data from the Productivity Commission has revealed a dark divide and a national effort still falling short.
We have a government that has no political will to change the status quo.
Just 4 of 19 targets are on track. 5 are improving, but not fast enough.
It comes back to a workforce issue. There's just not enough qualified people to really support our communities.
Key areas are worsening. Indigenous incarceration on the rise once more. Now more than 16 times higher than that for non-Indigenous Australians. Suicide rates are also climbing, now to more than 3 times the national average.
If we're not looking at the systemic racism that our people are dealing with, that also contributes to these high incarceration rates, then it's just putting band-aids on.
The figures painting a grim picture for First Nations children. Fewer are developmentally on track, especially in remote communities. And in some areas, less than 1 in 5 children meet key milestones.
My greatest fear is that these results will look exactly the same in 5 years. And the great tragedy of that is there is a very clear roadmap for what success looks like.
With just 6 years left until the Closing the Gap deadline, advocates are now urging the system itself is failing.
These targets have continually been unfulfilled. We've continued to move backwards.
But a glimmer of hope with some signs of progress in place. Land and sea rights improving and economic participation growing, while the federal government points to investment in jobs, health services and remote communities. saying it's up to state and territory governments to drive change and improve outcomes where they hold the levers.
The Closing the Gap program should be abolished, and we need to go back to all of the work that has been done by our old people.
Cause for celebration in some areas outweighed by declining results in others. One message remains clear: the gap is still far from being closed.
NITV's Mikili Siren reporting there. King Frederick of Denmark and his Australian-born wife, Queen Mary, have wrapped up their official visit to Australia. Their final stop, Hobart, offering up plenty of hometown memories for Queen Mary.
Crowds gathered for hours for their chance for a brush with royalty, including some Danish expats and travellers.
Very, very special. So we absolutely adore Mary. You know, she's the perfect queen. So it's been like Christmas for us coming up to today for the last few days.
We have been feeling they have been chasing us, if you can say so. We didn't know they were going to be here, so we booked our tickets to Tasmania.
We knew that they were going to be in Australia at the same time as us, but we thought that we wouldn't be at the area when they were here, so we were really excited.
Yeah. Before the royal rush, a quiet start with a traditional cleansing ceremony. A busy schedule in Queen Mary's hometown, but still time to check out her old high school from the water.
Yeah, some good memories popped up.
Learning about kelp conservation and getting up close with some sea creatures. From one boat to another, this one still under construction, unveiling a plaque on one of 3 electric ferries destined for Denmark's waters in the coming years. A quick trip north to New Norfolk, touring the garden at the Agrarian Kitchen. And then on to Mona, catching a performance from Danish electro-pop group Roya.
You can just sense that this is a very special trip for them. It's like no other state visit I've covered with the royal couple. This is just so different. They are so at ease here, they feel at home, they are relaxed.
Finishing the day where they started, back at Government House for a state reception. Karen Thomas, SBS World News.
With prices at the Bowser set to skyrocket across the country and dozens of service stations running out of petrol due to panic buying, filling up your tank could soon put a significant dent in your budget. Motoring experts have shared some simple measures to help make your fuel go further.
As a fuel shortage in some parts of the country continues and prices surge, a quick stop at the pump can feel like a splurge.
For a lot of people, they probably haven't had to think about this stuff. You jump in the car, you go. The service light might come on, you might ignore it, you might put it off for a few weeks.
The Royal Automobile Club of Victoria says you can significantly improve your car's fuel efficiency by avoiding hard accelerations and braking, checking tyre pressure regularly, unloading unnecessary weight from the vehicle, and removing roof racks and rooftop tents.
It doesn't sound like, a particularly innovative thing to do, but that's the kind of thing that's going to have the most impact.
There's already been a steady move to electric vehicles, but with the escalating price of crude oil globally, there's been a sharp increase in EV interest.
We would probably be monitoring inquiry from phone inquiry, walk-in inquiry at an average about 45, 50 a day. We're talking about before this dramatic change. Now we are getting close to 80 to 100 inquiries day-to-day basis.
Australians bought just over 90,000 new vehicles during February, while the sale of petrol cars dropped more than 17% compared to this time last year. Electric car sales soared by 94.5%. Looking to enhance the take-up of fossil fuel alternatives, scientists at the CSIRO have developed what they say is the world's first proof-of-concept quantum battery. The battery uses the laws of quantum mechanics to enhance performance and functionality and is powered remotely by a laser. They hope their research will lead to quantum batteries large enough to use in cars.
Instead of stopping your car to fill up your petrol or to charge your battery, you would have a process where the quantum battery would be charged as you drive. But this is very much into the distant future.
For now, many motorists will have to look to save money at the pump, the old-fashioned way. Asha Abdi, SBS World News.
Well, the Australian share market has tumbled to a 4-month low as oil prices surge on the back of the escalating conflict in the Middle East. Our finance editor, Ricardo Gonçalves, has more. So, Ricardo, unfortunately, this uncertainty is really persisting.
Yeah, that's right, Janice. And it's not just investors, but the head of the world's biggest central bank. Overnight, the US Federal Reserve left official interest rates on hold as expected at a range of 3.5 to 3.75%. That's still above Australia's cash rate of 4.1%. Chair Jerome Powell says it's too soon to assess the impact of the war in the Middle East.
The thing I really want to emphasize is that nobody knows. You know, the economics effect could be bigger, they could be smaller, they could be much smaller or much bigger. We just don't know.
The Fed is projecting higher inflation, steady unemployment and just one cut to US interest rates later this year.
It is possible that we don't see that cut in 2026. And a lot of it depends on the duration of this war and how high and for how long the oil prices stay up.
And with some investors doubting a potential US rate cut, precious metals fell, the gold price falling to below $4,900 an ounce. The greenback strengthened, weakening the Australian dollar, buying 70.38 US cents. It's also down against the other major global currencies, including the Japanese yen, as the Bank of Japan also kept interest rates on hold, but at 0.75%. Jerome Powell, meanwhile, says he'll continue to serve as chair beyond the end of his term, which concludes in May, if his successor isn't confirmed by then. Donald Trump's pick, Kevin Walsh, needs to be approved by the Senate, but that process is being stymied by a criminal investigation launched by the Department of Justice into Powell. To the Australian share market now, which tumbled 1.7% today. That is a 4-month low, $50 billion wiped from the ASX 200. It means the index is now down 7.6% since the start of the war in the Middle East in late February, more than some other major share markets.
Have led the way, unfortunately, I guess, because we're more resource-based, and also we have seen, good gains over the last year or so in some of the resource sectors, which are coming under that serious pressure at the moment.
And that continued today. BHP down nearly 3.5%. Gold miners also fell, along with the technology sector. Energy stocks did well, though, unsurprisingly. That's as the oil price surged nearly 11% compared with this time yesterday. Well, despite the recent 50 basis point increase to official interest rates this year, along with higher oil and gas prices recently, the Reserve Bank says the vast majority of borrowers continue to have sufficient income to cover their scheduled mortgage repayments and essential expenses. In its half-yearly financial stability review released today, it said the share of variable rate owner-occupier borrowers with a cash shortfall had fallen to just over 1% by the end of 2025, and that suggests a smaller proportion at risk of falling behind on their loan than in previous years.
The Australian financial system is entering this more challenging period with a good level of resilience. Most Australian households and businesses have built up financial buffers, although rising cost pressures will impact some borrowers.
The Reserve Bank added, however, the risk of operations, cyber and security disruptions on the financial system has heightened. Well, is the higher cost of living forcing older people to find work? The ABS said it saw a rise in the number of people aged 65 and over move into part-time employment last month, boosting part-time jobs, while fewer left work to retire compared to a year ago. Despite this increase in total employment, Australia's jobless rate jumped from 4.1% to 4.3% in February, but that's because the participation rate also rose, meaning more people in or actively looking for work. So, with unemployment within a tight range seen over the past year, some economists say it leaves the RBA to focus on rising inflation.
inflation obviously is picking up because of oil prices globally, and that's going to feed into other aspects of the CPI as well. So, for example, jet fuel prices have increased, and that will mean international airfare prices will increase. Some of the transportation costs will increase, and that will feed through perhaps to higher food prices. So it's not just the petrol prices that you pay at the pump, but it's also prices of other goods and services that will be increasing.
As a result, economists at Citi expect another interest rate rise in May. Australia's population has risen to more than 27.7 million. The ABS says that's an annual growth rate of 1.55% in the year to September. That's below the 1.75% seen a year earlier, where the dot is on the chart, and under the post-pandemic peak of just over 2.5%. Now, that growth came predominantly from net overseas migration, in red on the chart, so that's arrivals minus departures. However, they're down nearly 15% on a year earlier. Natural increase in blue, which is births minus deaths, rose by almost 8%. New South Wales continues to be the most populous state or territory. Victoria grew the most by number, Western Australia by percentage. Tasmania is growing the slowest. Queensland, however, is benefiting from the most net interstate migration, meaning most residents around the country are choosing to move to the Sunshine State over others. And amid the continued rollout of Australia's under-16 social media ban, a global report is linking social media use to lower happiness levels in young people. The World Happiness Report found that life evaluations, which is the overall measure of a person's satisfaction with their life, have dramatically declined over the past 2 decades among under 25s in the US, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. Overall, for all 147 countries surveyed, the longer younger people use social media per day, the less satisfied or happy they were. And in blue in the chart, it was more evident in girls.
The anxieties about the labour market, if you're graduating today from university or a tertiary degree, good luck trying to catch up with ChatGPT. There's a lot of generalized anxieties out there. And then add into the mix political polarization, democratic instability in many cases, and a bit of climate change on top of it all.
Australia still ranks comparatively high for happiness internationally at number 15. The happiest, though, goes to Finland, the Nordic nation topping the list for the 9th straight year, followed by Iceland and Denmark. Costa Rica jumped to 4th, Janice, which is the highest ranking ever for a Latin American country.
They've got better weather, that's for sure. Thanks so much, Ricardo. Coming up, well, the seemingly unbreakable code that's led to these two scientists bag a major prize. Plus, a US-based 18-year-old is a surprise call-up to the Socceroos squad. A piece of encryption technology, quantum cryptography, invented back in the mid-1980s, has been recognised with this year's prestigious Turing Award. Charles Bennett and Giles Brassard's invention used quantum mechanics to create a new form of highly secure and seemingly unbreakable code to prevent unauthorised access. The Turing Award is often referred to as the Nobel Prize of Computing. The two winners will share a prize worth more than $1 million. The Confederation of African Football has defended the decision to strip Senegal of their African Cup of Nations title won back in January against Morocco. Senegal has signalled its intention to appeal the ruling at the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The ruling was based around Senegal's walk-off late in the final after conceding a late penalty. Despite returning around 15 minutes later, their action was deemed to have broken tournament regulations.
The independence is reflected by the decisions that were taken by the two bodies. The CAF disciplinary board took one decision. The CAF appeals board took a totally different position. And I'm told that, that Senegal is going to appeal, which is very important. Every one of the 54 nations in Africa have a right.
The Moroccan Federation says its original intention wasn't to challenge the sporting outcome, but rather to request that the regulations of the tournament were applied. Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Liverpool and Atletico Madrid all progressed to the last 8 of the UEFA Champions League this morning. Barca hit 7 past Newcastle, while Liverpool returned to form to send Galatasaray out. Brazilian striker Rafinha and Robert Lewandowski both scored twice, securing an 8-2 aggregate win. And it was a good night for Liverpool.
Compliment to the team for how we came out in the second half, because we've had a lot of setbacks this season. We've had a lot of first halves or second half where we created chance after chance after chance without doing justice to how we performed.
Bayern Munich claimed the biggest win on aggregate though. Harry Kane's double helped it 2 over the 2 legs. Coming up, the weather details and a rhino relocation that promises a bright future. Japan will take on the world number 15 ranked Matildas in the Asian Cup final this weekend. Asia's top side powered past South Korea in a convincing 4-1 victory in last night's semi-final. But Matildas defender Steph Catley believes a famous victory is still within their grasp.
An epic semi-final clash in Sydney packed with passionate fans. Japan's clinical finishing putting them in control, dominating the match against the Korea Republic.
Japan trying to spill possession. Nagano! Huaki! Great footwork and the shot on the tie goal!
2 early strikes inside 25 minutes, setting the tone, cruising into half-time in charge. Another goal for Japan before Korea Republic pulled one back in the 77th minute. But the favourites finished emphatically, sealing a 4-1 win. And now they're eyeing off Saturday night's final.
Hey, you know, football can be played in many ways. Australia has done it fantastic, and we have played reasonably well, but we can be better.
Veteran defender Steph Catley was watching the world number 8.
Discussing ways that we thought would be best to set up and where we can take advantage of. They look a complete team at the moment. They look very, very strong. They've had a great tournament and seemingly cruised through most of the time.
Neither side dwelling on past clashes, Japan has won its last 3 meetings, including a 4-0 victory over the Matildas in February last year.
Easy as you like.
But this Tilly squad has seen key attackers return to fitness.
Sam Kerr, wow. She's still going strong, and she's still one of the world's best strikers, and she's showing it time and time again.
Both sides are where anything can happen, and the Asian Cup title is wide open.
Just really have to be 100%. Defensively, we have to be a unit, be completely together for 90 minutes or longer. But yeah, honestly, on the day of the final, anything can happen, and it's about who wants it more.
Strong ticket sales will ensure a memorable event headlined by Australia's ARIA winner, G-Flip. Genevieve Lamond, SBS World News.
Socceroos coach Tony Popovic has named 18-year-old Lucas Harrington in the squad for the FIFA Series matches starting against Cameroon next Friday. The US-based Harrington is one of 3 new faces alongside Ante Schuto and Denny Urich.
With the World Cup less than 3 months away, Socceroos coach Tony Popovic has left the door ajar for some new faces. Teenager Lucas Harrington's move to Major League Soccer with the Colorado Rapids has grabbed attention. The defender's goal-scoring prowess, another reason he's in the World Cup reckoning.
I believe it's an opportunity to have a look at him, and certainly one for the future, but there's an eye on him that potentially he could be in the World Cup squad.
Popovic is on record as only wanting players prepared to fight for a Socceroos jersey, but he doesn't hold any ill feeling towards Adrian Segičić. After playing at youth levels for Australia, he recently chose to follow his heritage and represent Croatia.
If that's where he really wants to play, and that's where he wants to, what country he wants to represent, if he gets into that squad, then good luck to him.
At the other end of that journey is Ante Schuto, who is Croatian-born but qualifies for Australia thanks to his Melbourne-born father. Good form with Scottish Premier League side Hibernian, giving him the chance to visit Australia for the first time and have a shot at earning a World Cup spot.
He's in due to what he's showing on the field. He's scoring regularly, albeit he's coming off the bench. So it's down to his performances. Like, he showed the desire to play for Australia, and his performances have shown that he deserves to be here.
The two games against Cameroon and Curacao are also a chance to fine-tune his expected lineup. Injuries in the right-back spot strengthening the claims of Jacob Italiano and Fran Karacic.
Jacob Italiano came in out of nowhere really and showed us that he can play in that position. We're hoping someone else can do that now. We've brought in Fran, obviously, who naturally can play that role.
The games will provide an important building block towards the World Cup in the USA, Mexico and Canada.
Having this opportunity to be together, coaches, players, staff, it's invaluable for us.
The tournament kicks off in 84 days' time. John Baldock, SBS World News.
To the weather forecast, and as we saw earlier, Tropical Cyclone Narelle is expected to bring destructive winds and heavy rain to North Tropical Queensland. Moist onshore winds will direct showers over eastern New South Wales. To the major centres now, showers on the way for Sydney, a shower or two and a possible storm ahead in Canberra, overcast skies in Melbourne, partly cloudy in Hobart, Adelaide and Perth, some showers to increase for Darwin and a shower or two in Brisbane. Checking conditions further afield, thunder in RPS and drizzle ahead for Port Vila, clear and warm in Auckland. To Southeast Asia, overcast skies in Phnom Penh, thunderstorms in Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, wet weather in Jakarta and Dili. Further north, clear and bright in Beijing, overcast in Tokyo and Shanghai, partly cloudy in Hanoi. Zipping west, wet weather on the way for Beirut and Jerusalem, partly cloudy in Baghdad, thunderstorms in New Delhi. To Europe, partly cloudy in Dublin, overcast skies in Berlin, showers in Warsaw, some drizzle ahead for Madrid and wet weather in Istanbul. To Africa, overcast in Algiers, a few showers on the way for Casablanca, thunderstorms in Lagos and drizzle in Addis Ababa. To South America, partly cloudy in Caracas and Panama City, thunderstorms to roll through Bogota, overcast in Lima and some showers to soak the streets of Rio. And for North America, wet and showery in Vancouver and Toronto, overcast in Chicago, clear skies in New York, partly cloudy in Havana and some rain in Honolulu. Rhinos have returned to Uganda's Kidipo Valley National Park for the first time in more than 40 years. Two southern white rhinos mark the beginning of a plan to rebuild a lost population. The species was wiped out in the Uganda's wild decades ago by poachers. But conservationists say this reintroduction is a hopeful step towards restoring the park's natural heritage. Well, how about this for an unexpected gift from the airport shop at Hobart? A wild possum has snuck in between the plush toys. There he is, blending in with his stuffed counterparts. It's thought it entered during renovation works and was safely escorted back into the wild. Super cute. That is the world this Thursday. If you missed any of tonight's bulletin, you can always catch up via SBS On Demand. And the SBS News website has the top stories and much more. You can get news anywhere, anytime with the SBS News app. Catalina Flores will be back with our next bulletin. That'll be just before 10:40 tonight. Till then, from the World News team, good night.